Hello everyone, today I will continue telling the story of the single mother, Dieu Hân. This morning, Han carried her child to Men's house to leave the baby in her care. In her hand, she carefully held a ripe, golden pineapple, the very fruit she had nurtured for months. Seeing the large, beautiful pineapple, Men couldn't hide her joy. Han, you're so talented. This pineapple looks like it came straight from the market, but I bet it tastes even better. While Han was chatting with Men, the landlady also stopped by. She gently asked, Han, how's the search for your father going? Any leads yet? Han simply shook her head, her eyes tinged with sadness. She shared everything with the landlady. The three women sat together, talking and sharing their worries. The warmth of their conversation was comforting, as if empathy had quietly drawn them closer. Before heading to work, Han politely excused herself and left. As soon as Han was out of sight, the landlady turned to Men and sighed. I really feel for that girl. Raising a child alone and still searching for her father. It's heartbreaking. Men nodded in agreement, her eyes full of sympathy. Yes, she's had such a hard life and faced so many troubles. But what they didn't know was that at a nearby tea shop, a strange man had been silently watching. He had overheard their entire conversation. His cold, piercing gaze was fixed as if he was memorizing every detail about Han. Not long after Han left, the man abruptly stood up, paid for his drink, and quickly walked away with his backpack. He began asking around the neighborhood, claiming to be an old acquaintance of Han, who urgently needed to find her. Seeing that he was an elderly man who spoke politely, some neighbors unsuspectingly gave him directions to Han's house. He followed a narrow dirt path, walking slowly while his eyes darted around, as if he was afraid of being caught. His movements were strange, and with every step, the atmosphere seemed to grow heavier. When he finally reached Han's house, he stopped for a long moment, observing it carefully, before stealthily approaching the door, like a predator closing in on its prey. When he finally reached Han's front yard, the strange man cautiously scanned the surroundings. Seeing Han fully absorbed in his work in the garden, the man crept forward step by step, moving silently like a shadow, not making the slightest sound. Waiting until Han turned his back, the man slipped through the door and slowly entered Han's house. Han remained completely unaware. Every step the man took was careful, every glance sharp and calculating. When a faint noise came from inside the house, Han jerked his head around, startled. But seeing nothing unusual, he returned to his work in the garden. Taking advantage of this moment, the sinister man quickly opened the cupboards and began rummaging through everything. While searching, he accidentally dropped an object onto the floor, creating a small noise. Han immediately stopped what he was doing and stepped into the house to investigate. He scanned the room, moving cautiously, checking every corner. The cupboard was still closed, the windows tightly shut. Nothing seemed out of place. He frowned, convincing himself it must have been his imagination, then turned to go back outside. At that exact moment, hidden in the dark corner behind the door, the strange man held his breath, his eyes glinting with cunning. As soon as Anna's attention was elsewhere, the man quietly slipped out of the house. Even as he reached the alley, he looked back at Han's house one last time. A cold, unsettling gaze that seemed to promise he would return. On his way out, the strange man suddenly stopped in front of a small old house hidden among the trees. He glanced around cautiously, his sly eyes calculating something, then without hesitation, he slipped inside. He rummaged through everything, from the termite-eaten wooden cabinets to the dusty old chests. The creaking of rusty hinges echoed through the empty space, making the atmosphere even more eerie. Just then Han happened to pass by and noticed a stranger inside. He frowned, stepped closer, and suddenly caught sight of the man rifling through the house. Hey, you there! Stop! Han shouted. Startled, the man didn't say a word and immediately bolted. Tan charged after him, the two of them racing down a narrow dirt path, dust rising in their wake. Despite his age, the stranger moved frighteningly fast, as if he had done this countless times before. After a long chase, Tan finally caught up and grabbed him. The two struggled fiercely, but suddenly, the man twisted free, snatched a wooden branch from the ground, and struck Tan hard on the shoulder. Thud! The sound of impact cracked sharply in the night air. Tan staggered in pain but refused to give up. Yet, the ruthless man showed no mercy, swinging the branch again and again. Within moments, Tan collapsed onto the ground, his breathing weak, his vision blurring until he finally lost consciousness. Panting heavily, the cruel man stared at Tan's motionless body for a brief moment, as if to make sure. Then, without a second thought, he turned and disappeared into the darkness, vanishing as though he had never been there. The vicious man fled, leaving Tan lying unconscious in the middle of the deserted road, with no one around to notice. Meanwhile, Han had just returned home. She called out for Han repeatedly but received no answer. A wave of unease washed over her, urging her to search the surrounding area. Then faintly in the distance she heard Anna's voice. Following the sound, Han's steps eventually led her to an old, abandoned house hidden deep within the trees. The rotting wooden door creaked open slightly, and inside a dim light flickered. Han stepped in and was taken aback to see An, the petite yet determined girl, standing in the middle of the dusty room. An was carefully inspecting the cracked walls, the sagging ceiling, and every cobweb-covered corner. When she noticed Han, An gave a small, hesitant but resolute smile. "I'm planning to move here. Even though this house is run down, I want to fix it up myself and live independently, just like you once did." Han froze for a moment, a deep worry rising in her chest. The house was far too dangerous, practically a trap waiting to collapse. She had also heard that the owner of this abandoned house was notoriously difficult, and she feared they wouldn't allow An to stay there. Stepping closer, Han spoke softly. "How about this? For now, stay at my place. Once this house is safe, you can move in." "Okay." An remained silent for a long moment. Her eyes wavered with hesitation but soon burned with determination. "I want to be independent, Han. I don't want to rely on anyone forever." Han looked at her for a while, and in that moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of empathy. She understood that desire, because she had once longed for the same thing. Finally, she smiled gently and said, "All right. I won't stop you. But until this house is safe, you'll stay at my place. I can't rest easy otherwise." An met Han's gaze and seeing the sincerity in her eyes, eventually nodded. Soon after, the two of them rolled up their sleeves and began cleaning the abandoned house. Under the fading light of dusk, the sound of sweeping mingled with the creaks of old wood and the occasional soft laughter. It was as if hope was slowly being restored, even though countless unseen dangers still lurked just beyond the shadows. Tan lay unconscious from daylight until darkness had completely fallen. Only when the night had fully enveloped everything did he slowly regain consciousness. A sharp, throbbing pain in his head made him dizzy, and his whole body felt drained of strength. He braced his hands against the ground, taking a deep breath to steady himself. After resting for a while, once the dizziness subsided, Tan leaned against a tree trunk by the roadside and slowly pushed himself up. Every step was heavy, but one thought burned in his mind. He had to get to Han's house. He didn't know who that man earlier was, or why he had appeared in this area, but an unsettling feeling told him that something was very wrong. Gritting his teeth through the pain, Tan dragged his weary body toward Han's home. At last, when he reached the yard, he gathered the last of his strength and shouted hoarsely, "Han! Han!" His desperate voice echoed through the stillness of the night. Hearing it, Han rushed out. Seeing Tan staggering, pale and barely standing, she hurried to his side, panic written on her face. My God. Tan, what happened to you? Tan forced a weak smile and said in a faint voice, Earlier today, I saw a strange man near here. I tried to stop him, but he knocked me out. I've only just come to. Han's heart pounded with worry, not only because of Tana's injuries but also because her house was deep in a remote area where few people ever passed by. If there truly was an intruder lurking nearby, the situation could be dangerous. Tan asked seriously, Han, have you made any enemies lately? Han shook her head, trying to calm him down. Probably not. Maybe it's just because it's durian season. Thieves might be sneaking around and you just happen to run into one. Even so, Tana's eyes remained clouded with concern. He knew deep down it wasn't just about fruit thieves. Han gently helped Tan into the house, settling him into a chair. She brought a warm cloth to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Her voice filled with quiet care. Rest here for a while. I'll make you some ginger tea. Oh, and I have something I need to show you. She glanced toward the room where An was tidying up her things. Han let out a soft sigh, knowing this night was going to be much longer than either of them had expected. An was sitting and playing with Tom, Han's little son. When she heard Han call her name, she turned around and smiled politely at Tan. Tan nodded in response, but the moment his eyes stopped on Anna's face, his entire body froze. His expression shifted from confusion to sheer shock. Stammering, he asked, Is this An? Han nodded to confirm, but Tan shook his head repeatedly, as if refusing to believe what he was seeing. He stepped closer, his gaze searching Anna's face, desperately trying to find something familiar. Then suddenly he blurted out, No, this isn't An. She's Hoa. I'm certain of it. The words left Han stunned. An, on the other hand, stared wide-eyed at Tan, utterly bewildered. Tana's hands trembled as he reached out and grabbed Anna's hand, his voice choking with emotion. You're Hoa. Long's lover, my best friend's lover. And you even had a son. An immediately pulled her hand back, shaking her head frantically, her voice trembling. No, I'm An. I'm not this Hoa you're talking about. Tan looked as though he had been struck, but he still insisted. No, I can't be mistaken. I remember clearly. It's you. Hearing this, Han grew even more confused. She glanced at An, the woman she trusted and had shared so much with, then turned back to Tan, her eyes full of worry. Tan was so overwhelmed that his voice quivered as he fired question after question. Why are you here? Where's Long? Where's your son? The relentless questions made An tremble, her face turning pale. She staggered backward, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm not Hoa. I don't know who Long is, and I don't have a child. The room fell into tense silence. Seeing the situation spiral, Han quickly stepped forward, gently wrapping her arms around Anna's shoulders and guiding her inside. All right, An, calm down. Just rest for now. An, like a frightened little bird, trembled uncontrollably. Han tried her best to comfort her with a soft voice, then turned to Tan with a firm, warning look, silently urging him to stop. Han gently helped An inside, carefully easing her down to rest. An's face was still pale, her eyes clouded with confusion as if she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Han softly patted her shoulder, trying to comfort her. It's going to be okay. An gave a small nod, but her uneasiness was still clear. Seeing this, Han could only sigh and gently hold her hand, as if to pass on some of her own calmness. After that, Han stepped out to the porch and motioned for Tan to follow. The two stood there under the night sky, the quiet broken only by the sound of crickets. Tan's expression was tense, his eyes unwavering. Han, I'm not mistaken. That girl isn't An, she's Hoa. I know who Hoa is. Han looked at him and slowly shook her head. But An, she's always said she's An. I've been living with her for a while now, and I've never seen anything strange. Tan, maybe You've mistaken her for someone else. Tan frowned, his fists tightening. No, I'm not mistaken. But I don't understand why she's here, or why she doesn't remember anything. Maybe something happened that we don't know about. Han stayed silent, her mind tangled in confusion. Part of her wanted to believe Tan, but another part feared this was nothing more than a misunderstanding. At last, she placed her hand on Tan's shoulder and spoke gently. An is terrified right now. Don't push her any further. Let her rest for tonight, and tomorrow, we'll figure out what's going on, okay? Tan stood there for a long while, then finally nodded. He turned to leave, though his eyes still held a storm of doubt and unanswered questions. Before walking away, he cast one last glance at Han's door, as if hoping it would somehow give him an answer. Back home, Tan tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The image of Hoa No-an kept replaying in his mind. Why didn't she recognize him? Why did she deny everything? Meanwhile, Han returned to the room. She found An curled up on the bed like a frightened child. Han walked over and gently embraced her. It's okay, An, just stay calm. Rest. We'll know everything tomorrow. An gave a small nod, but her hand still trembled faintly. Han stroked her hair softly, comforting her like an older sister protecting her younger sibling. Deep inside, Han's thoughts churned. Could Tan have mistaken her? Or had something terrible truly happened that caused An to lose her memory? That night, the three of them, Tan, Han, and An, were each lost in their own thoughts. Every one of them carried a different worry, a different unanswered question, and all they could hope for was that tomorrow's dawn would finally bring the truth.
Ánh là ánh hay ánh là hoa, giống như Thành đã nói. Rốt cuộc ánh là ai? Quá khứ của cô ấy như thế nào? Liệu rằng Thành có nhận nhầm ánh hay không? Người đàn ông bí ẩn xuất hiện chỉ là một tên